Whether or not you enjoy the Arrowverse hero shows, you have to admit that the Superman and Lois series just feels different. So much so to the point where people ran with the idea that the reason for the series' clear uptick in quality was because it was funded by HBO Max, myself included. But in reality, WB just cared. I'm not exactly sure why they seem to put so much care into this particular series. Maybe it's because of the huge Superman void since 2013. Or maybe the last Superman series they had was such a huge fan favorite that they didn't want to follow it up with a dud. Whatever the reason for it, I'm glad, because outside of a few very minor personal nitpicks, there's not much I can complain about this show. It's pretty crazy how tweaking some color grading and pairing it with some writing that focuses more on character development than world building can do for a show like this. The consensus on this show for most viewers seems to be it's either pretty good or amazing in one of their favorite shows. If the worst thing someone's saying about your show is it's okay, then you're probably doing a lot of things right. Up until this point, I didn't make a video on this series simply because I didn't know what I could really add to the conversation that the vast majority hasn't already said. But ever since my CW video months back, as well as my more recent Arrow video, I've been getting so many comments and DMs of people asking me what I thought about Superman and Lois. So if you've never been here before, my name is Eddie, and this is Nerdy Before It Was Cool. We nerd out about TV and film, especially ones that are based on comic book characters. And I'm gonna get into a few key reasons why I think this show was such a massive success with the majority of people who watched it. Keep in mind throughout this video, guys, I've only seen season 1. I haven't yet sat down to watch season 2 yet, but let's get into it. It's pretty common for writers of these comic book movies and TV shows to change up a lot about the character. If those changes make sense for the world being presented to me, I'm good. I've accepted that those changes are just gonna happen at this point. I personally love the darker, more rooted in realism take of Man of Steel, but I also like the warm and lighthearted, wholesome take of Smallville. And the cool thing about this series is we kinda get the best of both worlds. Honestly, we get the best of all worlds. It takes bits and pieces from pretty much every version of Superman that we've seen thus far. He has a hint of that gullible dorkiness from Dean Cain in the Lois and Clark series.
Cool costume.
Thanks. My mom made it for me.
He's completely starstruck the first time he meets Lois, and that first chunk of episode 11 season 1 pays homage to that series pretty heavily. He also kind of has this suave cool factor that he can turn on and off that takes very clear influence from the Christopher Reeve era of Superman. There's also the humble and borderline altruistic innocence of Brandon Routh's version of the character, but underneath all of that, there's also a little bit of anger and broodiness that he clearly has trouble keeping in check sometimes. Although the show is very positive, it has no problem questioning the darker possibilities of Superman, which is basically a nod to the new 52 era Superman that the Henry Cavill and Snyder version is heavily based off of. John Henry Irons sees Superman as this monster that turned on his world. He thinks this Superman will do the same. He's blinded by rage and this dangerous prevention at all cost mentality. Very similar to how Batfleck was in BVS. Morgan Edge also acts as this General Zod type of figure, another Kryptonian that has a completely different outlook on the world. Much like General Zod, he views humanity as weak and evil. He wants to restore his people and home planet by any means necessary, but it's more impactful here because he spent time as a human. His experience on Earth are completely separate and different from Clark's. Clark was welcomed while he was hunted, captured, and tortured. It makes his quest to restore his people a lot more understandable. It's still very clearly wrong, but it isn't just evil for evil's sake. And although I do love the twist that he was Kryptonian, I don't quite know how I feel about him and Clark being literal blood brothers. I think that's a little bit on the nose personally. That's just kind of one of those very small nitpicks that I have, but I would love to hear what you guys thought about that twist down in the comments. But on top of all that influence from all the movie version of the characters, we even get some Smallville series vibes with the clear indication of the past relationship between Clark and Lana. And come on, Jordan is literally a darker, more emo version of Clark from Smallville, who just so happens to now be dating Lana's daughter. This series doesn't disregard or turn its nose up at any particular version of the character, and noticing those influences has been one of my favorite parts of viewing the show so far. Relationships are a really big part of these CW shows, but I don't think that I'm alone in saying a lot of the drama and tension and conflict comes off very melodramatic and forced a lot of times. For the most part, that's never really the case here. The few melodramatic moments that do happen usually come from Jordan and Johnathon, which makes sense and is acceptable and palatable because they're teenagers and everything is the end of the world when you're a 15-year-old kid. I like that all of the arguments, all of the conflicts, and all the tension here just feels very realistic. Like when Johnathon gets a little bit reckless and gets on John Henry Irons' RV, looking for weapons and is nearly killed. Lois goes absolutely berserk on him.
Okay, let's calm down.
You knew there was a risk, I know you did, and yet you went in anyway, alone, behind my back. What, to find weapons? You almost died. Not because you were unarmed, because you were reckless and stupid! And if you had died, the only person that would have been to blame is yourself!
But we later find out that she had a miscarriage when the kids were younger. And seeing all those photos on John Henry Irons' computer and hearing that his daughter's name was Natalie, which is what they were going to name their daughter after her grandmother, it just sent her over the edge and she took it out on Johnathon. There's an initial conflict between Clark and Jordan as well. Jordan isn't athletic, he suffers from panic attacks, been on medication for a while, and even before moving to Smallville, he felt alone and isolated, pretty much disconnected from everyone, including his dad, who from his perspective loves his normal, more outgoing, and more athletic brother more than he does him. So when the metal piping falls on them in the barn and they were safe and protected, of course he presumes it was Johnathon. Hell, watching the show, so did I. Johnathon and Jordan have some pretty interesting conflict throughout the first season also. Back in Metropolis, Johnathon was the man. He was the starting quarterback. He was extremely popular in school and on the team. And now they moved to Metropolis. He's unpopular. He's essentially a third stringer. Doesn't have any friends. And on top of that, he finds out his brother has superpowers and he doesn't. Those same superpowers allow Jordan to make the football team and now become this huge sensation at the school. Johnathon doesn't want to resent him, but you can tell he definitely does at times. The crazy part about their back and forth throughout the season is Jordan, even with his powers, still feels inferior to his brother and in his shadow. I think their relationship is a very realistic depiction of a lot of people's sibling experience. And most importantly, at the core of this show is Superman and Lois. As beautiful and as heartwarming as their relationship can be, they are two fundamentally different people. Even beyond the surface level city girl country boy depiction, their views on parenting and communication styles are almost extremely on opposite ends of the spectrum, which leaves them at odds a lot. There's a lot of pretty heated moments between Lois and Clark in this series, but what I love about their relationship is no matter how high the tension gets, they never do anything spiteful or vindictive to each other, and I have to say that she is probably my favorite on-screen Lois Lane. I've always found Lois's characterization a little odd at times. Most of the time she comes off as that typical snooty girl, has a really good nice guy in her corner that likes her, but she goes for the Superman or the guy who she thinks is perfect. So I like that she falls in love with Clark and not the man in the suit.
I'm not talking to you as your producer, I'm talking to you as one of your best friends, and I am telling you there is some serious chemistry happening.
Listen to me.
And you need to bring your A game if you want to go out with the world's most eligible bachelor.
I am not interested, okay? I'm in love with someone else. Clark from the paper. We've been dating for a couple months. I know he's dorky, but I love him.
Final thoughts, man, I really enjoyed season 1 of Superman and Lois. When it comes to these CW shows, I see a lot of complaints talking about CGI and special effects as a reason why a show is bad. But to be honest, the CGI isn't top tier amazing in this series. It has some really cool sequences in slow motion that looks really good for TV at times. But like I said, it's not top tier. But it just goes to show that people will overlook things like that when you have good characterization, you have good character arcs, you have realistic relationships that people can be invested in, you have real conflicts and tension that's not just based on melodrama. All of those things can go a really long way. And me personally, I think the best thing about this series to me is it's so disconnected from the Arrowverse. I love me a cinematic universe as much as the next man, but it always hits a ceiling. There will always be a ceiling when you're trying to build a cinematic universe. And I feel like CW hero shows were hitting that ceiling probably 4 or 5 years ago. So I like that this show feels like a standalone. Obviously we get the John Diggle appearance at the end, but they weren't trying to tie it in with everything. They weren't trying to go back and do a team up. They're just letting us know, hey, even though this is a standalone, it is in the same world. I hope they continue to do that moving forward. Personally, I just think that would be in their best interest. I only have 2 nitpicks of this series. One, I thought the "I'm actually your brother" reveal was just a little soap opera-ish. I just felt it was a little on the nose, and I think that entire storyline could have still played out in a really amazing way, even if they weren't blood brothers. And also, I'm not a huge fan of his suit. I don't mind the design, but I don't like the pre-shaded and pre-designed lighted areas of the suit with the fake abs. It just doesn't look good to me. Me personally, I prefer his suit from Supergirl. I thought the quality of it was just much better. And I wish they would have just kept that suit and added some padding to it if they wanted him to look bigger. I just don't like the overly designed ridges and abs and lighting. It just kind of makes it look like something that I could personally go pick up at the local cosplay shop for a couple $100. I'm glad that they upped the CGI. I'm glad that they upped the quality, but I feel like an extra $600 or $700 could have went to the suit to make it look a little better. Honestly, those are my only 2 nitpicks. And guys, I would love to know what you guys think about Superman and Lois. Is it the CW's best show? Or do you think it has more to live up to before it gets that tag? Let me know in the comments.